Did you ever wonder what makes the difference between a very nice quilt and a prize-winning quilt? The secret is in the details. Using the right supplies and a couple of handy notions will give you crisp, near-perfect seams that are found in prize-winning quilts. Soon, I'll reveal the secrets to you. The quilt that we have featured was made by Sue Petruski on the Nancy's Notion staff. She is a prize-winning quilter, an exact quilter. Everything lines up, the seams are flat. She used the pattern called Diamond Head by Cozy Quilt Designs. It's a beautiful work of art. And if you'd like to learn these techniques, we're going to first start with seaming techniques. And I'm going to suggest to put your quilt seams on a diet. If you're wondering what I'm meaning by that, the thread. Use a lightweight thread rather than the traditional all-purpose thread for extremely flat seams. You're looking at the collection of Katona thread. It's by Madeira. It's 50 weight. Now thread is kind of a funny naming system, and that is that larger the number, the lighter the weight thread. This is a 30 weight thread, an all-purpose thread by the same manufacturer. And even though they're both black, I think you can possibly see, and I can certainly feel, the heavier thread compared to the much lighter thread. Compound it by 2 because of the needle and the bobbin, and that extra weight of thread will take up more width in the seam allowance. So use that lighter weight in both the needle and in the bobbin. And then keep on the skinny thought by working with a very narrow, trim 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. To make certain that you have a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, select a little foot or a patchwork foot. A 1/4 of an inch width is the distance between the needle and the right side of the presser foot. Here as I'm stitching, I try to guide that seam allowance or the edge of the fabric right to the edge of the foot to give me that trim 1/4 of an inch seam. Now you may be saying to yourself, does it really make that much difference? Well, surprisingly it does. We made 2 blocks using the thread, 50 weight on one, 30 weight on the other. And we did not cheat, honestly. And I'm laying one on top of the other. And you can see that I'm matching the seam allowances at the side and the seam allowances in this corner. And even though they were cut the same, there's about an 1/8 of an inch difference all the way around the block. Again, compounding that by the number of blocks in your quilt, you're going to have a much smaller project. And the seams are not going to be quite as flat. So do keep that in mind. Lighter weight thread and a skinny seam. Now for pressing. There are 3 ideas for prize-winning quilts when it comes to pressing. First of all, to work on a pressing surface. This is a Steady Betty pressing surface. It fits on the top of your ironing board or just lay it on the top of your ironing board or on a table. It's a heat-resistant material where the fabric does not shift. You really can't even move it on here. It just has a nice attraction. You can fill it with steam and it's not going to hurt your tabletop. Speaking of steam, fill your seam with a lot of steam. Here are 2 products that might make your sewing so much easier to use: thermal thimble fingers protectors. Place them on your fingers so that you can get very close to the tip of your iron. One option for prize-winning quilts is to press open the seam, or you can press the seams in one direction, but pressing them open will give you that little quilt-winning advantage. Then after you've kind of pre-pressed them open, then give them plenty of steam. Just fill it with steam. And then remove the steam by flattening the seam with a tailor clapper. And just push, and the moisture will be absorbed into the surface as well as to the tailor clapper. When I first started using this for tailoring and sewing, I would pound my seams. It's not necessarily. All you have to do is compress and hold it for a while. And when I lift this up to show you, it is a perfectly flat seam. Sometimes you get little tucks, and when you press a seam open this way with steam and flattening, it's perfect. Our next technique is for pinning, and that is to use fork pins. Because we have this now pressed open seam, and we want those seam allowances to be stacked one on top of each other, rather than using just one pin on either side, use two, but the fork pin is 2 in 1. You can see it rounds at the top, but there are 2 ends. So it's the width of the fabric, so you can a little bit less than the width of the seam, and you can position it on both sides to keep that seam flat when you're stitching. So now you've put your seam on a diet. You found ways of steaming that seam flat, making it crisp, and then pinning so that everything will align perfectly. Nancy's Notions offers a full selection of sewing notions to test out your new sewing skills and quilting skills. Order your supplies today.